And welcome. We're back with our serious social lives after a very long summer break. And this time we're going to talk about a little bit more about big picture thinking, because for many of our clients and brands, they are now beginning to think about planning for next year. So when you work every day in social, it's really easy to think the whole world is just about social. Of course it isn't. In fact, social is terrifically leaky and gets everywhere, touching all the channels and melting into all your campaigns. So if you're smart, then you'll consider social as the oil in your marketing engine. That means having a wider view of marketing, a better understanding of how they all fit together, and ways to uncover the kind of synergies that will make things work better. So to help us see where the broader marketing plans are heading in 2022, I'm joined by Zoe Gill of Little Moo Marketing, a fabulous B2B marketeer with experience from, oh God, just so much experience, from strategy to execution. And together we're going to talk about planning. Let me bring Zoe on board. Together we're going to talk about planning. Hi, Zoe.
Hi.
Why don't we start, Zoe, with you just giving us a little bit more background about yourself?
Sure, no worries. Thanks, Katie, and thanks for inviting me along today as well. Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I've worked in marketing for nearly 20 years now, from everything across events, business process outsourcing, in-house agency, but fundamentally, it's given me this really nicely rounded view, not just of marketing, but actually the commercial aspects of a business, which I think are really important. So now I get to work from sort of end to end, so research and diagnostics, planning and strategy, but the actual doing and execution, and importantly measuring as well to see what impact it's having. So I guess really I'm a marketing generalist, is where I sit now. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
I love it, and I don't know how you. I have enough trouble holding social in my head. I don't know quite how you hold all that in your head. But and that's really interesting for many B2B marketeers and businesses. The chaos of the last 18 months and the jumping through very short-term goals, because it's been very hard to plan, hasn't it? Means now we're kind of getting back, assuming things are getting back slightly more back to normal, to really serious planning and fixing all the things that we kind of broke last year.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest challenge, and how do you start to fix these issues?
So I think one of the biggest challenges is where a lot of companies used to have historic data that they knew what sources worked well, what sources generated leads. The pandemic has kind of basically just taken that, given it a good shake, and muddled things up into different trends and different patterns. So I think one of the biggest challenges initially is understand what impact your activities are having now. Don't assume they're going to perform in the way they always did pre-pandemic. So spend a bit of time in data, in analytics, and just understanding what your users are up to now. But don't do it once, like do it every month. Keep doing it, and then you're going to start understanding those minor and major shifts that take place on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, we created this report from interviews with other marketeers in the B2B world. And one thing that was very clear was data is at the heart of everything. And you really can't be looking at old data. People are changing. I mean, we've seen in social, to give you an example of a more integrated approach, is the move away from lead magnets, the old fashioned download my white paper. Well,
Yeah.
We've kind of had enough of that as buyers. So your buyer community is not so keen to hand over data without something of a value exchange. And that means that in social, you need to think much broader, and brand matters. This idea that it's not just about capturing those that are ready to buy right now, but those that it's making you memorable. So when they are ready to buy, they remember you and come to you. So I think there is a sea change we're beginning to see, certainly with buyers, and the more advanced B2B brands are beginning to think like that. Think bigger scale rather than down in the bottom of the funnel.
Yeah, I think the trust aspect and building that trust has become even more important. I think, last year people became really nervous of making decisions that normally they'd make in the click of a finger. So I think people are a little bit more risk averse. They know they need to take some risks, but they want a safe pair of hands to guide them through doing that, to give them the confidence. So yeah, completely agree.
So one element we cannot ignore that's accelerated, now we're able to talk about the wider marketing things, is digital transformation.
Yeah.
Which everybody seems to be either doing or do. And it's a massive topic. But in a top, it is huge. But in a top line way, what are the priorities for companies you're speaking to? What's kind of to the fore, because we're, it's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Yeah, so I think, tying in with actually what we just said, like people were expecting more now. They want that content. They want to feel educated. They want to feel like they're learning. They want to feel like they're getting value. And actually to do that, it has to be that omni-channel approach. It's not just about the multi-channel. It's about making sure there's this consistent experience through everything so that they get that value. And I think behind the scenes, it's actually about getting the right systems in place to make that efficient. So you haven't got a marketing team behind the scenes doing everything manually. You're building in automation that's accurate throughout the process as well, and just speeding up that engagement. Getting people to engage. You've got a customer there. What can you do to continually engage them and fundamentally bring them back in when they're ready to make that inquiry, and not just in research stage?
Well, it's so true, actually. And I hate the term omnichannel because people throw it around without knowing what they mean. But in the respect of what you're getting at is that whole coordination, the spinning of plates in the right way.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting. 8 in 10 B2B leaders say that omnichannel, say again, is as or more effective than traditional methods. And I think this is growing quite sharply, is the understanding that, I talk about social being leaky, but actually everything is moving together, and it's not like the way we used to plan, 30 years ago, where it was very clear, there was almost a demarcation. The part of digital transformation that's really hard to get your head around is the fact that everything sort of melts together. I'm not expressing it very well, but what I mean. It's sort of everything has an impact on everything else.
It does, and I think actually from going back to that kind of omni-channel and the experience being at the center of all that, if you haven't got all of your channels telling a similar story, then someone's going to go, hang on, you're expecting me to go from chapter 1 to chapter 5, but you haven't told me the middle bit. So it being joined up is so important to be consistent and use everything consistently.
And that's even more interesting, because even in social, so LinkedIn say that it's somewhere between 5 and 9 touch points. That the idea that you can immediately push people to sale is a real fallacy. And it also misses that opportunity. So we talk, when we talk about B2B social, much more in terms of nudge nurture. Which kind of brings us quite nicely round to, because we talked about what brands want to do, but actually what are our buyers doing, and how do we approach our audience? Tell us where you think businesses should be in terms of personalization.
So it obviously it's going to vary for every business, but fundamentally for me, brands have to make that emotional connection with the end user. Again, even more so after last year. Like, I hate keep referring to last year, but I think what it's done is people who are searching and looking for solutions to their problems, they're even more focused. They don't want to waste time consuming content that isn't relevant, and they will probably move on even more quickly than they ever did before. But I think understanding customers, what their pain points are, what their challenges are, what keeps them awake at night. They want to feel like there's, despite the fact you're having a one-to-many conversation, that it's a one-to-one conversation. And I think that's the key thing for me in terms of personalization, while you're trying to hook them in, is make them feel like you are talking to them one-to-one. despite it being one-to-many. Obviously, you know, there's lots of tools that can help with personalization once you've hooked them in. For me, those tools kind of, you know, approach with caution, test them a lot. You know, the exam results of 2020 were a perfect example of how, you know, AI can skew things and go off piece. So, you know, just test, but try and make sure those interactions are as personalized as possible.
And in fact, that's a really good point. I think quite a lot of planning for next year should be around test and learn. We have audiences shifting so much that, you know, because of the change in travel, the change in whether we're at home or not at home, or change in business, means that we're going through those shifting sands. And I've done this once when we went from analog to digital. So, you know, when we've gone from recession to back up there again. And my general feeling is that if you cannot stick to a solid plan, you have to test and learn all the way through.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, that test and learn. Absolutely, I think that's an ongoing part of marketing. You know, build in a small test each month, whether it be a new ad on or a new market on paid, or, you know, a different piece of content. But test quickly and learn quickly. You know, so do short tests. If you can gather enough data in 2 weeks, do a 2-week test, and then make the decision: do you tweak and go again, or actually is it just a no-go? So yeah, ongoing learning without doubt.
Absolutely. Another interesting part is that we're seeing in social is that rise of neuromarketing in B2B, which kind of focuses more on the psychology. And we've been terrible at this in B2B. We tend to go, oh, they're buyers and their job title is this and they work in this country or in this kind of enterprise or whatever it is, rather than actually thinking about the psychology of key buyers and decision makers. A shift from kind of the topic driven, you know, here we are and we're going to talk cloud, to persona driven and psychographic marketing. So when we talk about personalization, it's not like, you know, hey, you with the 2 kids living in Guildford or wherever it is, you know, it's much more. I'm just making stuff up now.
I like it. That's a cool persona.
And it matters because only 21% of buyers believe that they're given relevant information from vendors, despite them spending more time researching their purchases in social and beyond. And more importantly, if it's relevant, your B2B buyers are more, something like 85% of them are more likely to share with the wider decision-making unit. And we know more than anything now that for the majority of B2B companies, that it's not one person making the decision to buy.
Yeah.
So I found some really interesting data from HubSpot, some insights from HubSpot looking at buyers, and they say 56% of respondents say they consume more types of sales and marketing material than they did pre-2020, and marketers are reporting that they spend more than 40% of their budget on content production. One of the really big challenges faced by marketers is content creation, whether it's for social or email or any other promotions. So how should they approach this challenge?
Big question. No. So for me, the headline of this is keep it simple. Like, don't try and do content for content's sake. You know, there is nothing worse than going, oh, we've set the target of producing, you know, 3 assets or 3 resources or 3 bits of content, and then going, oh, doesn't feel like we've got a solid topic, but we have to produce it. Like, just don't. Make sure it's quality every time, you know. Make sure you're doing it regularly and doing it consistently, but always quality. It has to be relevant. Like you said, there's so much more content out there than ever before. You want your content to be that piece that really does give them, sort of educates them, provides them with insights and adds value. That's really key as well. So research your topics. You know, most organizations have the experts for the services you're selling. Grill them, interview them, listen to calls they're having with customers or prospects, so you can hear firsthand what those people are saying, and then create the content around it. But one other bit of advice I've got is, once you've created a bit of content, don't just publish it and move on. Revisit that bit of content. Can you create a graphic off the back of it, a video, some mini blogs, a mini series, make the most, milk it, I guess, is the way to go. But yeah, easy to consume, quality over quantity, and make the most of the content you're producing as well. Those would be my top tips.
Oh, super, absolutely. And one of the key parts to working out whether your content is good, is a value exchange, is to really, and it's quite a hard exercise, often you have to do it with other people because you need more brains in the mix, is why does this matter to your audience?
Yeah.
We're in B2B, we're very features and benefits led. It's the way we've been taught to think, but actually the world has changed to a different perspective, and it's if we can nail the why does this matter to the CTO, why does this matter to the FD, why does this matter to a marketing manager, whoever it is you're selling to. My point is, if you can nail that, then you actually begin to understand how the customer fits into that journey to purchase and what their expectation is at each level. And that's the depth that you need to go to now with all content, in my view. And whenever we see those ads that do so well, or those promotions, or that content that does so well, when you really look at it, you think somebody has really thought about this, really thought about what matters to the customer or the viewer or whatever it is, has really given it some thought. It's not an easy job, but it's better to slow down, do less, and as you say, shatter it, atomize it afterwards.
Yeah, and I think actually content-wise, social is a really good tool to use to see what topics are resonating as well. So I think it's where we were talking about testing before, there's no harm in testing some topics on social if you can't get a feel, do some tests, put it out there, see what people engage with, and let that help drive it. Again, it's going back to that data piece. Like, let data help guide you into the right direction.
So I want to just switch to another piece of which actually plays into a lot of content, because trade events have been the staple of B2B marketing toolkits forever, I think. And 97% of B2B marketeers say that in-person events are critical to the success of their business. What do you think will happen next year?
So I think events, I think events will make a return. I think there's a real appetite. I think some industries probably more so than others. But I do think there's a real appetite for events. We're those that are very sociable, we're kind of craving those social aspects. And I think it comes back to what we've been saying about content. I think there's just a lot more thought and detail that has to go into not just what you're going to say at those trade events, but the why. Again, that why piece is so important. But what's going to make your stand more appealing, and how are you going to engage with them both before, during, and after the event? Keeping them engaged. I don't know about you, Katie, but it feels like some decision-making processes are a little bit slower than before. So that need to keep them engaged after that initial conversation is really important. It's not on them to remember you. You've got to keep reminding them of you.
Yeah, that's a whole nurture part of the nudge nurture, which we sort of trips off our tongue, but it really is the nudge to the next level, the nurture, because not every product is bought every week, and it's you've also got the issues of some stuff requiring more than one person to purchase. So nurturing is super important. I agree.
And that personalization piece, if you're in a position where actually you can, the account manager, the salesperson, the product, whoever had that conversation can actually send a one-to-one email that's like, it was great to chat to you about XYZ. Like, if you can personalize that post-event follow-up, then make them feel like someone has made the effort to speak to them on a one-to-one basis. It will really help with that stickiness, I suspect.
So we talked a little about test and learn, but I'd like to, the way you learn is through measuring, isn't it? You've got to measure something. But rather than going to the nitty gritty, I wondered whether or not we could just have a quick conversation about when we look at the big picture, everything, because you look at everything, what are the core metrics you look for Should we think about attribution models as a kind of de facto standard? I don't know what the answer to this one is.
So in my opinion, the answer is yes. Like there should absolutely be a picture of that kind of overall piece, and assisted conversions. Reporting that I've done for clients. If you look at that traditional last click, the reality is the majority of them are either going to be a direct visit to your website, or they're probably going to be through an organic Google search. There will be others, but on the most part, that's what you see. And if you look at that, there's a real risk that anyone, especially sort of in the finance arena, could go, well, why are we spending money on paid, and why are we spending money on this? So actually viewing inquiries or visits, whatever your goals and metrics are, as the whole journey is so important, because as soon as you start picking away the interactions from first to last and everything in between, you start building the picture about actually where social comes into it and where paid comes into it. And you will quickly see if one of those cards is pulled, actually you're probably going to reduce your overall sort of inquiries, leads, whatever your measure may be. So absolutely, in my opinion, always look at the full journey, not just the last click.
Yeah. So true. Absolutely so true. Because one of the things we see in social is that social can act throughout the journey, but it has different impacts. And, couple it with something like email marketing, and it doubles the impact of email marketing, or it gets open rates better, or it increases search demand. And if you're not watching everything, you won't see that where how everything works together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really easy to pull something without having that insight and then go, oh, what's happened? So it's really important.
So we've seen some marketing departments get quite small over the last couple of years, and they're building back up.
Yeah.
What are the skill sets for the future? Are we going to be hiring that? What talent do we need to achieve success?
Yeah. So I think there's a real balance, and I've seen this, through the roles I've done in the last couple of years, and also clients I'm working with now. But there's a real need both for that generalist piece, so almost kind of the conductor, I guess, of a team that can kind of understand all the areas of the mix. But there has to be the experts as well. You do need people. You need people who live and breathe social, who live and breathe paid, who live and breathe SEO, to really make those things work and work well. And I think it's the kind of job of the generalist, the head of, the manager, to feel comfortable and confident in going, that isn't my expertise, but we need it to make this plan successful. That's okay. We can't all know everything. So yeah, I think it's a real blend, but it's the confidence to go, that's not my bag, but we need someone whose it is.
Yeah, I always remember years ago, Ashley Friedline really picked up on the T-shaped marketeer, that has broad knowledge but specializes in one thing. I whenever I hear this, I always think, yeah, you can't know everything. I mean, even in social alone, you can't know everything. I love insights. I absolutely love social media, but when it comes to paid, I'm no expert. I have colleagues who just know their stuff when it comes to that, and just that's not me. I just, for some reason or other, it's just not me.
It's building your team tactically, like they would in the sports world. Get the right players in the right position who are really good, and they're built for that, and they've got the minds for that. Build your team to its strengths.
Yeah, so much so. What do you think are the big priorities for 2022 then? What should, as we roll into the end of the year?
So I'm potentially a little bit biased here, so I'd be interested to see what your take on this is, Casey, after I've said it. But for me, it's content. The old phrase from the early 2000s, content is king, I think is, going to ring true, and the phrase is going to come back more and more. But meaningful metrics as well. So like I said, use the data. And if you haven't got the data, focus on finding out how you access it. For me, plans are tweaked and changed on a monthly basis for client based on what we've seen through the data. we react to it, or we do more of something, or we do less of something. So keep your metrics simple. Don't get lost in 500 things that you want to track every month. Pick a dozen that when you look at them each month can give you meaningful and actionable insight, not just a number to capture it on a spreadsheet, because that becomes time consuming for the wrong reason. So yeah, content and metrics.
And also it can shove you down a rabbit hole, can't it? You can
absolutely. Yeah.
For me, I would, absolutely agree with everything you say, and all pretty much what you've threaded throughout this, which is, yes, personalization, yes, data, yes, about nudge and nurture, but also brand. For B2B marketeers now, brand has got to play a larger than majority play in the content we produce, which means a lot more thing. And I'm when I talk brand, I'm really not talking about your logo, okay? Brand is not that, okay? And I think there's that side of it, and the need for building relationships and trust. Because maybe it's because we've all been locked away. I don't know. It feels like it, but with the desire to create relationships with the brands that we're buying from is definitely very high. So I think that means relationships with your employees, which brings in things like employee advocacy. We did a webinar on that yesterday. Things like community. All of these things are much bigger picture thinking that bleeds into culture and employee kind of happiness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Zoe. It's been,
thanks for having me.
I love the bigger perspective, because it reminds all of us in marketing that it's never just one thing, and it's part of the joy of marketing, isn't it? That we get to juggle so many things. I mean, it gets chaotic sometimes, but and you've been a star helping us kind of navigate how best to do that.
It's been a pleasure.
So going forward, we are we're not going to be running our Serious Social Lives every week, because we're not shut away anymore, and we're out and about. So we'll be doing some real world events in between. But we will be doing monthly. We'll be back next month. Other than that, have a lovely weekend. Thanks again, Zoe.
Thanks, Katie.
I'll see you soon.